What informs meaning about this to you? Are you okay if I record it?
Yeah, absolutely.
Cool.
How long do you want the response to be? Like a minute, 2 minutes?
This could be as long as you want. It can range from like 5 minutes to, I mean, I've done some that are more than an hour.
Wow.
It's basically,
Is it like a single answer you're expecting, or?
I've never been asked that before. And I guess the answer to that would be, so I'm basically exploring
Mhm.
how you arrived at a conclusion.
Yeah.
And I guess there is one answer to that, but it might turn into a deeper conversation. Does that sound okay?
Yes.
Okay, cool. How much time do you have?
I definitely don't mind like spending like 10 minutes or so.
Okay.
If it goes slightly more, that's fine.
Yeah, I try to keep an eye on how long I'm taking, and I try to check in to make sure that you're doing okay on time and stuff.
Right.
Cool. Thanks for stopping, by the way. What's your name?
Victor.
Victor? Cool, good to meet you, Victor. My name's David.
Good to meet you too.
Yeah. So, just to kind of sum up what I'm doing is basically out here interviewing folks in our community about something that they think is true, something that's meaningful to you. And I'm basically asking questions, not necessarily to focus on what the conclusion is so much, as how you arrived there. What process did you take to assign a certain level of confidence to it? Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay, cool. So, Victor, right?
Yes.
Victor?
Yes.
Awesome. Cool. Well, is there something meaningful to you that you think is true? Something true or real in our shared reality that I can ask questions about?
Indeed.
Okay. What, can you put it in like a statement form? Like X
Definitely.
is true?
Well, my immediate thought after seeing the sign that phrased the question was to answer by saying, I find it very meaningful when someone remembers your name from the first time when you meet them for the second time, since it shows that they paid enough attention to you, or that their experience with you, however long or short the exchange was, they appreciated it enough to remember who you were. And I'm not saying that I realize that not everyone is able to do that or is capable of doing that for whatever reason, but it is incredibly meaningful when someone's able to do that.
Okay. So remembering somebody's name or having someone remember your name from just one interaction, that seems meaningful to you because it seems like they were paying attention to what you were saying or giving you...
Yes, and or they perhaps are paying attention to something about your persona, your appearance. Um, and I mean, oftentimes these attributes of ourselves take quite a long time to cultivate. And we spend time working on ourselves to develop into the person, not only that we hope to admire ourselves, but that we hope that other people can sincerely enjoy being around. And perhaps it shows that they were able to do that when they meet you the second time, not truly knowing you yet, but able to have recalled that good experience with you well enough to remember the name and put the name to the face.
Okay. I kind of want to maybe pull back a few layers about this idea. Um, but first, I'm kind of curious, whose responsibility do you put on the most for somebody remembering the name? Like, if we were to talk and I didn't remember your name next time, would you say that that's more my responsibility or yours for not having such an impression?
Well, I'm not entirely sure. I mean, it seems to be a delicate balance in some ways. I think it would really be depending on, I mean, perhaps maybe you asked me and I said it very quietly, or um, perhaps I didn't have a lot of clarity in my tone when I said it, and so that wouldn't really, I don't think that would really be your responsibility to remember if it was um, confusing or perhaps lacking in clarity. But um, generally, and I'm trying to get better and trying to work on my like cognitive skills in terms of memory, because I need to work on remembering names. But generally, I think that that would be the person receiving the information likely be their responsibility in that situation. But I mean, if someone doesn't remember my name, I never get irritable with them or upset with them. I just politely remind them.
Okay, gotcha. What informs meaning about this to you?
Well, I think it's meaningful. I would say if you think back on, or think forward, or think presently on relationships in your life that are of great value, perhaps you have a wife, a partner, a best friend, um, maybe a cousin you're rather close to, a neighbor that you really care about, someone in your community, maybe they're an elected official, maybe they're some kind of like religious leader or civic leader. They could be your son or daughter's like soccer coach or something, and you respect and admire them, and you know their name, and maybe it's been years that you've been in contact with this individual, but these are all examples of relationships. They could have very sort of kind of surface level meaning if we don't know the person very well and, meet and talk to them on an obligatory basis, or they could be very significant, meaningful relationships like a wife, a partner, a husband, some kind of spouse. Um, and so, but the reality of even the most significant ones is that at some point they were a stranger to you. At some point in your life, you didn't know who they were. And there was a time in your life before you knew them. There was a time in your life before you even knew your parents, or maybe your inception, or when you were uh, the fetus was being formed inside of their uterus, perhaps. Um, and you didn't really know anyone yet. But I mean, at some point, you developed the ability to hear and listen and respond, and then eventually, meet people yourself. And we use language skills in order to do that. So it makes me think of like perhaps you have someone you are in some kind of a close relationship. It could be romantic, it could be platonic, but at some point you had to have met them. And chances are you were able to recall their name the very first time. Now, I haven't done like a scientific study on this using psychology, and then analyze those results, but I would be willing to bet that most people who formed a significant relationship with someone were able to remember their name by the second time they were able to meet them. Does that make sense?
Yeah, you're talking about the significance of someone.
And I think that's why it informs meaning.
Okay.
I'm sorry if it was confusing.
No, I think I understand. Yeah, you're saying that what drives meaning for you about this is that there are different levels of relationships that we have, and that could inform the meaning that we have in the relationship.
Right.
Okay.
And at some point you had to learn their name. And how exactly did you do that? Was it easy for you to remember because their face, their personality, or something about them made you remember them? And I think that can be very meaningful. And if it wasn't very meaningful, chances are you didn't remember their name.
Uh-huh. Why should we remember people's names generally?
Well, I guess I would choose to not impose it as a rule, just because there are going to be situations in which an interaction with someone might be very negative, and perhaps you already learned their name or you didn't learn their name in that interaction. But if it wasn't a pleasant experience, I wouldn't encourage anyone to remember that individual's name if they'd choose to rather not see them again. But if it was a positive interaction that you enjoyed being in, and there's some pleasantry there, I would say yes. It is likely a great idea to try and remember their name. And I believe that you will, more than likely, if it was a good experience.
Why should we?
Oh, why should we?
Yeah.
I would say it's definitely something that one can be appreciative of, and I mean, I definitely think like it's something that shows it's a very respectable trait and quality of someone to be able to recall the person, and it shows that you perhaps develop some sort of ability to care about them enough to remember their name, and I think it even reveals that you're interested in getting to know them even a little bit more than you already have. And I realize that we don't know someone particularly well based on two conversations or meetings we've had with the person, but I believe it does reveal either your intention or your desire to get to know them better. And I think that's something that a majority of people, I think it's safe to assume a majority of people would really like that, granted that it was beneficial to both people.
Okay.
The interaction.
We should, because it's beneficial in terms of respectability and how it can make somebody else feel.
Yeah, and I think it shows consideration, that you're being considerate and that you have courtesy.
Okay. It might sound like I'm just asking the same question, but why is that important?
To have courtesy and consideration?
Yeah, like, why is any of this important at all? Is there like a grounding value that you hold that supports all of these ideas about respectability and
Well, I definitely think the happiest people that I've seen examples of, the most exemplary members of society, whether they've achieved success in some type of measure, whether it's ordinary or extraordinary, they seem to have both of those characteristics of being courteous, excuse me, and being considerate. And
happiness and success.
Well, I mean, I do think that there is some correlation there. I don't think they're mutually exclusive, but many happy people are successful, and many successful people are happy. And I'm not saying that everyone who is successful is happy, or that everyone who is happy is successful. But I do think that there is like a positive correlation there between those two sorts of, I would say, characteristics, where they can feel like emotions as well.
Okay. Got it. The people that you seem to find happy and successful in those terms are the ones that have these traits of respectability and courtesy.
Yes.
Okay.
And I realize that when I use these terms, people might wonder, like, what do you mean by that? Can you define this
Yeah.
term so I know, like, what your interpretation of it is? Since I don't have the dictionary right here to like look up how it would define these terms, I mean,
I would want to know how you defined them.
Okay.
With the way that you use them.
Okay.
So
And
feel free
how
to.
many are there? Are there 4?
Traits?
Yeah, the ones that you'd like me to define.
Oh, I guess successful. That might be the first one that I want to know what you mean by.
So, personally, I would think that having succeeded means that you have aspired to do something realistic and attainable and with your life after having set a goal. And it could be in terms of a career, it could be in terms of an education, it could be in terms of entrepreneurship, it could be in terms of perhaps your artistry and you enjoy making, clay sculptures or pottery or painting. It might be in terms of gardening, which is another form of artistry. Perhaps it's for activism.
Is it solely the aspiration? Or
I think it means that you have the desire to work toward that aspiration in an ambitious way, and you're meeting those, perhaps the demands or the expectations that you're making for yourself.
Could someone be aspirational and not successful?
Yes, I would say, because, if they're not actively working towards those expectations or goals they've set, they could have aspirations but not necessarily meet the success if they choose not to or aren't able to.
So does success require action or just
Indeed.
Aspiration?
It does require action. I believe it does.
Okay. Aspiration and action. And the action of working towards what they're aspiring to.
Indeed.
Okay. All right. So back to the memory, name memory.
Okay.
It sounds like what you're saying is if someone is successful, meaning they aspire through action, they're more likely to have traits that help them remember people's names?
I don't know necessarily that they'll have like the memory skills of like a robust cognitive, functioning mind, because there are people who have succeeded in their lives and perhaps they have dementia now and they're in like the elderly years of their life and they're in some sort of a cognitive decline, so they're not really able to remember things like they once were. But I would say that successful people who have achieved whatever their objective was through aspiration and action, at the very least, would very likely have the characteristics of courtesy and consideration. Among many other sorts of qualities, but those are some that I think are necessary to reach those sorts of objectives in life on an upward trajectory.
Okay, got it. You said you were working on your cognitive skills to be better at name memory?
Yeah, I definitely need to do that.
How are you going to go about doing that?
Well, I definitely think there are tricks. One might have tricks up their sleeve in order to learn how to do that. Last night I was trying to remember a person's name I'd already met twice. I remembered their spouse's name, and we were just having a lovely conversation, and I didn't want to feel like I was being rude, as though I didn't want them to think, oh, they weren't important, and that's why I didn't remember their name. It was nothing like that, and it was nothing personal. And so what I did instead was I said, well, the husband left, and the wife and I continued to have a conversation just as friends about everything else we'd spoken about before in terms of history and culture and so forth. I said, how did you get your name? Like, do you know the story behind how you got your name? Mm-hmm. And I knew that was clever Because even though I didn't remember her name, she was going to explain to me how it happened, and she happened to tell me, and then I learned again what her name was, and I was like, okay, now I'll never forget that, especially because she had a unique spelling to her name, and so that's not very forgettable in my experience.
Got it. So you were able to attach their name to an experience that you had about learning how they got their name?
Yeah, I mean, that's how I didn't want her to think I'd forgotten her name.
Okay.
And so I was like, what's the story of how you got your name? That's how
Got
I
it.
phrased it instead of just directly asking what it was.
Right, I see. Okay.
Because I felt like I wouldn't necessarily be outing myself as having forgotten.
Gotcha.
And they probably never
Okay.
realized.
So you're explaining a situation where you forgot someone's name or somebody forgot somebody's name,
Yeah,
and in order to not be embarrassed about forgetting their name, they asked them the story about how they got their name.
that's what
And
I did. Yes.
okay,
Uh-huh.
gotcha.
That
Yeah.
was the trick I had up my sleeve, and it worked.
Okay. So
Yeah.
that'd be one way to work on your skills.
Hmm.
Is there anything that's more important about somebody to remember them than their name?
Yes. Hopefully it's their personality. Are they kind? Are they accommodating? Are they empathic? Are they a good listener? Do they have intellect? Um, do they respect boundaries? I mean, there's so many reasons in which one might enjoy being around someone, but if they have those great qualities, perhaps they're simply the qualities of being a good friend. Um, I definitely think that's much more important than just remembering what their name is.
Okay. If if you wanted somebody to remember you, what would you want them to remember?
That I was thoughtful and that I had something that was interesting to say that they hadn't known before. Perhaps it was something that, felt like it was educational. Like, wow, that guy's interesting. Like, I never knew this before he told me that. Um, but also that I was thoughtful, and that could mean any number of things. It could mean that you're just a kind person, a respectful person, um, and or that you're a good listener, or whatever quality it happens to be. But yeah, definitely thoughtful and I'd say interesting.
Okay, cool. Uh, just a couple more questions because you said that you were short on time.
It's okay.
Um, how reliable are our memories, do you think?
Wow. I wish I knew how to quantify that. I think that would be a great question for either a neurologist, a neuroscientist, perhaps a psychiatrist. I think I've been told, and I don't know where this was read, but that the human brain can remember up to 100 million pieces of information, and that even if it exceeds that sort of capacity, that I mean, nothing really happens to your brain except you kind of, well, you'll be able to become more forgetful and not remember so many things after that because it's like over capacity. Um, I would like to look that up or ask more questions to some kind of qualified expert because I don't really know. But that's yeah, that's a really fascinating kind of question.
How accurate do you think your memory is? Like, what's your batting average?
My batting average for my memory,
Like 0 to 100, how accurate do you think your memory is?
let's just say 79%.
79? Okay.
Because there's definitely things where I'll recall a memory and maybe one or two other people were there and I might say, um, yeah, you did this thing, remember? And you lifted it up and you set it down and you couldn't find it or or you found it, and somebody might say, no, remember that was this person. And like thinking that like my memory has like this sort of video or like, photographic sort of evidence or proof of something, when in reality, like, it's not quite as accurate as it happens to think it is.
Okay. So 79, would you say 79 times out of 100, you've got an accurate memory of an event?
I believe that's probably a safe bet.
Okay. Why not 80?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like I don't really want to try to be like too sure of myself if sometimes I've been proven wrong, or sometimes just something just was so um, seemed like such an irrelevant time or just an insignificant sort of memory that I'm not able to remember because like it just didn't stand out in my head like it may have to someone else, and I can trust that they remember it better than I will. Um, Especially if I have no memory of it and they have some memory of it. If they're a reliable person who's trustworthy and they don't have a tendency to make things up, then I'm going to believe them regardless of whether I can remember it or not.
How what process do you take to determine if you've remembered something accurately or not?
Process do I take? Probably just by seeing if you're able to verify that statement, or that
What's an example of verification for memory?
going to a couple of other sources that would have been there, that would have seen examples of it around the general time frame or maybe that specific day.
Okay, like a witness.
Absolutely.
Okay,
It's almost like, yeah, eyewitness testimony
okay,
in a courtroom. Some form of evidence like such as that.
okay, gotcha. How how high would you want their number to be as far as their accuracy in remembering events accurately?
Hopefully something 90 or above. I mean, um, it might not be likely for the the general population, or I would say the majority of the general population, to have such a um, such an accountable, reliable memory, but um, I would hope that it would be a higher percentage, and that's like not a bad one to hope for,
Mm-hmm.
because some people have excellent memories.
Okay. If somebody said that they had a 21% accuracy level on their memory, what reason would you suppose they'd have for having a much lower than yours?
They may have been traumatized perhaps early in their life. They may have possibly lived with a learning disability. They may have um, developed defense mechanisms in order to survive like that possible trauma that I may have mentioned a minute ago as a defense mechanism, um, to get through it and endure it and survive and then move onward. Um, I think there are so many reasons, like psychologically speaking or neurologically speaking, that um, a person might not be able to remember uh, things taking place the way that perhaps the majority of people could.
Okay. Cool. Um, I'll let you ask me questions if you'd like. Um, but first, I wanted to ask you one more question. I'm trying to remember what I was going to ask you because I was trying to listen. Um, yeah. Do you have any questions for me? I was going to ask you if you had anything else to say about memory. That's what I
Oh,
was going to ask you.
do I have anything else to say about memory? Well, I think it's really obscure, and memory can be very obscure. I mean, I have a grandmother that's 93, and pretty much every time I talk to her, she'll tell me a story or various stories about growing up in the 30s and 40s and then being a young person in the 50s. And um, I've heard them so many times, and she doesn't realize like how many times she's explained the same ones to you.
Mm-hmm.
And it's really interesting, and I sort of theorized that those were like the happiest days of her life, were the very early part up to getting married, and that had some happy sort of blissful elements to it as well. But I mean, I think she was most fulfilled and most happy from the time she was born in 1930 up until the time she got married in 1954, so the first 24 years of her life. And so it seems as though when you had pleasant, sort of joyful memories over over the years, perhaps it's over decades, as hers were, I think that if you have a robust and functioning brain, it seems, and she did at that time, it seems that um, you're able to hold on to many of those memories. It's sort of like a traumatizing or frightening memory. Maybe it was someone's voice, tone of voice. They yelled at you, they threatened you, they did something, and you're frightened. I heard a medical doctor tell me, a psychiatrist specifically is what they were. They told me when things like that happen, even with tone of voice, your subconscious will hold on to it and you will remember it. And it doesn't matter how long it's been since that moment, you're going to remember it.
And it was based on the tone, not necessarily what was said.
I So they didn't specify whether it was the statement, like the words used, or whether it was the tone, but they said any sort of instance like that where you are frightened enough by what someone has told you, or perhaps the way they told you, you're going to remember it, whether it's like 60 or 70 years later or not. Isn't that interesting?
Yeah. Where it's like ingrained in you.
Right. It's like you're not likely able to erase it.
Yeah. I know that a lot of memories are because of like a traumatic event, and I'm curious about if we found out that the memory is inaccurate of a traumatic event,
Mhm.
like what that means, like what that would mean.
Yeah, well, I know back in the 80s you had different shows, and there was like this um there was like the trend of suppressed memories. There was a lot of people claiming to be experts in this field. Like most of them weren't even psychologists or psychotherapists, but they were trying to say that, oh, we've recovered memories this person's telling us, and then come to find out, actual licensed clinical professionals are saying that is unreliable. These are not evidence-based approaches to mental health, and these things did not happen, but they're being influenced and informed to believe that they did. I mean, there was like, if any of you were around in the 90s to see that show, Sally Jesse Raphael, she had an episode where she was talking about how it was like this distorted perception of things that didn't really happen, but it was going on a lot in the 80s and 90s, especially during like the satanic panic stuff.
Yeah, that's
Really bizarre.
That's an interesting subject to me.
Yeah.
Yeah. Cool. Do you have any questions for me?
I do. You'll probably edit this out. In that case, I understand, but I could use the
None of this
bathroom
gets
really
cut out.
fast.
Like it's all long form.
Oh,
Just
is
so
it?
you know, it's
Okay.
not like chopped up and stuff.
Do you mind if I use the bathroom? It'll only take me 2 minutes, and then I'll be right back.
Absolutely, yeah.
Okay. Thank you so
Yeah,
much.
Go for it.
Appreciate it.
Sure thing. Nice timing because it let the noisy train go by.
Oh, yeah.
So nice job.
I forgot. I always forget that it's there.
Yeah, I hardly ever hear it over here. It's normally on the other side of the lake, but
Mhm.
it's never been an issue over here.
Yeah.
All right, so where I think we left off was you had some questions for me.
Yeah. How long have you had your channel?
About a year and a half.
Nice. Is there any specific sort of content creator on there that on the platform that inspired you to do this, or was it more so just like your own conviction to do this with like people out in the community?
Speaking of community, there's a community of us around the world that do this.
Wow.
And there are several channels on the platform that inspired me. I can give you a list of them.
Cool.
So you can check those out too. Also, it kind of gave me a reason to connect with my community, because I like connecting with my community and talking about, topics that might be sensitive
Mm-hmm.
in a way where it's not like an argument.
Right.
I like to connect with community, but I don't like to argue. So this kind of gives me a way, a civil way to explore one's quality of reasoning.
Okay. I like that. Yeah, I didn't sense any sort of like objections or refutations of anything I said. It was just sort of like follow-up questions and particularities of wanting to know, like, kind of build on what I was saying. So I appreciate that.
Yeah.
Not that I don't mind civil discourse or people arguing or whatever, so long as they're communicating respectfully.
Yeah.
But yeah, this is an interesting, well, I would say it's a really unique form of interviewing. I like it.
Awesome. Yeah, you can check out my channel. I'll give you this. Did you take a picture of this already? That way you can take it home
I think so.
with you. You
Oh,
said
cool.
your phone doesn't do.
Yeah,
Scans.
sound septimology. Cool.
Sound epistemology, sound like the Puget Sound.
Oh,
And epistemology is the study of how we know stuff.
right.
The practice is called street epistemology.
Mm-hmm.
And if you want, you can take one of these puzzle pieces.
Oh, that's
Since you had
great.
the conversation, you can pick a color. If we have another talk, you can pick another color, build out the whole set, kind of thing.
Oh, wow.
And this kind of gives you a reminder of the conversation.
Thank you.
So you're welcome to take one of those. And that'll kind of.
Awesome.
I noticed you had a tattoo of Texas on
Yeah,
your arm.
I do.
What's that? What's the story behind that?
So, it's kind of like an unexpected one. Like, I always wanted to go there, and I've been 3-4 times at this point. But when I was young, I would watch like TV shows taking place there, like Walker Texas Ranger and like King of the Hill. And so I kind of was like wondering what it was like, even though I knew certain things about like the culture, like the Friday Night Lights and the football and the ranchers and everything else, but didn't know about all the separate regions of the state and how they all coexist and are slightly different in different ways, and especially in terms of climate. But I actually ended up living in San Antonio briefly in 2016. Didn't really last, so I came back to the Northwest. But I enjoyed certain aspects of of staying there. And then by 2018, I'd taken a DNA test, and we found certain things out about like my sisters and I, our generation. We found certain things we didn't know about our ethnicity because they were kept hidden and kept secret.
Mm-hmm.
We thought we would all just be this monochromatic sort of thing, but we weren't necessarily that. And so it was just really an interesting thing, and we were like surprised, and it sparked curiosity in a good way. And we found out that our great-great-grandfather was actually from Texas, and this little town north of Houston, and he migrated to the Washington Territory in 1890.
Okay.
And I'm like, cool, maybe he set that sort of he sowed the seeds or set that sort of appreciation that I had in motion.
Huh.
Many generations before I was born.
It was like a heritage thing and
Yeah.
like a culture thing that you were drawn to through TV.
Yeah, originally I was, yes, drawn through TV
That's
and
cool.
movies.
Cool. Do you have any other questions for me about memory or anything?
I think that about covers it.
Okay.
Thank you so much. I enjoyed this experience. I think this is awesome. And I think you're probably bound to get a lot more respondents.
Sweet. Thank you.
It's really coming down. Do you have something in mind?
You know, fairly often, obviously, depending on the weather.
Right.
We are going to hit the road and do a tour around the U.S.
Awesome.
Setting up the places.
Oh, that's a great idea. Nice.
And we're going to hopefully visit some other people in the community.
Right.
And so, yeah, if you happen to be interested in supporting that, there's ways to do that. And if you're interested in that, you can email me, and I can give you a whole bunch of other resources. That list of other content creators. Yeah, so yeah, it'd be cool to keep in touch.
Thank you so much. I'm going to look up your channel really fast.
Cool.
Epistemology. Oh, here it is. Okay.
So all of the titles are basically the ideas or the conclusions or the claims that people are making that we get to explore.
That's so great. I like that. It seems very experimental, which I think is awesome.
Yeah, everybody's different.
I like that.
Cool. So feel free to take one of those puzzle pieces.
Yes, thank you. And I
Choose a color, in other words.
choose a color. Okay.
Yeah. You don't get all three at once.
I choose this
You gotta
one.
come back for more.
Yes. Thank you so much.
Absolutely. Vincent, right?
Victor. Just kidding. It's fine.
Anything with the V.
Oh my gosh. That was clever because we did talk about remembering names.
Yep.